Yo, what's up guys? Alright, we're doing another build video today. It's going to be on an Armattan Rooster. We're doing a full KISS setup, so it should be pretty sweet, so stay tuned and we'll find out what's going in this build. In this build we got the Rooster, the Armattan Rooster. For the full KISS setup we're running the Mr. Steele PDB, the KISS V1 flight controller. We've got the Foxeer Micro or Foxeer Mini camera, the F60 Pro 2s. These are the 2500 kV. VTX, we're running the Race Day Quads Mach 2, and it will run the new Micro Crossfire Nano KISS ESCs, all Brain 3D prints, and the AXii Stubby. So that should be it. So we're going to go ahead and get everything tinned up and start building it. For the Steele PDB, we run positive and negative for the ESCs, and these three pads here are for the KISS telemetry, power, and that PWM and ground. These four pads right here are for your VTX. These three are for camera. Although we will not be using this audio pad, we will be using smart audio on the bottom of the flight controller. Since we're running the Mach 2, we will have a mic through there, and then this jumper right here for 5 volts and 7 volts, we will be jumpering it for 7 volts to the VTX. Alright, for the flight controller, we're only going to be soldering up 5 pads total. Right here is our S-bus pad, and then I think this is our power or ground, one of these two, and then aux 1 is for smart port telemetry. Bottom of the board, we use TX3 for smart audio. For these KISS CSCs, I like to put them in a little clamp like this to hold them, and we'll be soldering all 3 of these pads here, plus the 2 main pads for power and ground. Alright, so we've got all of our wires soldered onto the KISS ESC like so. I'm going to do that to the rest of the 3 of them, and then we will get them mounted up and the motors soldered to the other side. Alright, we got all of our ESCs, their wires on them soldered up, so we're going to go ahead and get the PDB mounted in the frame, and then get these soldered up to the PDB, and then get the motor soldered to them. Alright, so I installed the Mr. Steele PDB in here. It fits pretty snug. I installed it with the soft mount bobbins right here. I use these on most of my builds because they absorb a lot of the vibrations and help with oscillations. So our next step is to get our ESCs mounted up here and find out how we're going to wire the ESC wires into here, because this is not a straight shot. So I'm going to see what I can do to make it look the best and be the most functional. We now have all of the ESCs soldered on, and then I got some sticky tape. I'm not going to take the sticky part off, just using it as insulation. I've heat shrunk all of the ESCs, and now we're going to go ahead and get them all soldered up onto the PDB. One down, 3 more to go. You guys seen this in the video, this pad right here lifted off of the ESC. See it right there? That pad lifted off. brand new products. I have two quads that are running this PDB, like my Stingy here, and it lifted a pad right here, but that was because it was on impact, so it didn't come off because I was soldering. And as you guys seen as I was soldering here, I don't sit there and hold my iron on very long, so it did pull off, which is kind of a bummer. But I wanted to show you guys what happens if any of these ports do break off. It's a pretty simple fix. I'm going to post up a picture now of the pinout. For the ports on the flight controller. So the wires that run from these two ports from the PDB into these two ports on the FC. Now if you're running a different PDB, it doesn't matter as long as you are running these right here. I mean, obviously if you're not running these, then these wires, the PWM wire, would just run straight to the flight controller, so you wouldn't have an issue there. But the pinout that I just posted up, you can splice into it. So here we have this is on port 1 right here. It's got this is port 1. So the first 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 are the motor PWM. So if you ever break a motor PWM wire, you can splice right in. That's what I did on mine. The second one, or the next one over, is going to be your telemetry, and then the next one over to that's ground. So you can just, since this was a telemetry wire, the middle pad that came off, we're just going to splice right into the telemetry wire onto here. So I'm going to go ahead and solder this wire right here. It's a little bit thinner. I'm going to solder it in, and then we will splice into that telemetry wire and just route it that way. Alright, so currently I have motors installed, ESCs installed. I've got this wire here for the telemetry pad that lifted. That's the fix for that. We've got our camera installed. Now all that's left to do is we are going to install our receiver wires on the flight controller. We're going to install our VTX wires and our camera wires, and then we're going to get all that stuff mounted up. So for my camera, we're running the Preditor. This one doesn't have a cam control, so we will run, it goes power, it goes ground, 5 volts and in this direction, ground, 5 volts in. So the first one we will wire up is our ground. Volts. Our video in. Alright, next up is the VTX. This is the Mach 2. This is a pretty good video transmitter. I use the Unify in all my other builds. This is not a build for me, but I do have a couple of these that I will be putting in something in the future. But this is VBAT in. It can take up to 24 volts, I believe. Ground. This is your video, and then this is your audio. You can, I don't know if you can see, but it's got some solder on it already, which has got lead in it. So you can just kind of mix it up with some good solder to get that lead-free crap out of there. We took 2 wires that went to the telemetry port and I spliced in 2 longer wires, extended them down here, soldered them into this ESC's telemetry port. All the other ESCs, they all go into one telemetry pad, and they all run through one telemetry wire. And then this will still plug in down here, just like normal. And then it will come up here and get plugged in like that, just like it normally would. This is our smart audio wire, which will get soldered to the bottom of the ESC. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and get our Crossfire Nano wires wired up to the flight controller now. Alright, for the Crossfire Nano, this one is pretty small. It's hard to see, but this is the pinout. It goes channel 2, channel 1, 5 volts, ground. And then also, for this one, it's got the through holes. I'm going to go ahead and use the through holes on this one just because the pads are so small. It'll make it, give it a little bit stronger joint on these small wires. Trimmed up the heat shrink on there, about that long. I will have to put a UFL connection on here, which is the Crossfire. So after I shrink it, I'm going to cut a little section right there for the antenna, because this style, I'm using the Immortal T inside of this mount. So in order to get this on, it has to be in the mount and then on there. I would solder it on there with it already connected to it, but then I would run the risk of having to remove this every time I had to remove this antenna. So I'm going to just, after I shrink wrap it, I'll cut a little square in there, and then I'll secure it with the UFL, and then I'll put some hot glue around it. This is what I meant by cutting a little square. That way it's still all heat shrunk, and those connections on the bottom are protected, as well as all the other connections on the receiver, except the square is cut out for the UFL to connect to it. Wiring up the Crossfire to the KISS flight controller is the same thing as wiring up a FrSky with telemetry. You've got this is your S-bus pad, this is your 5 volt pad, this is your ground pad, and then this is AUX1, which is going to be your telemetry pad. But this on Crossfire will be channel 1, and this will be channel 2. So at this point we have our receiver mounted under here, which I have already connected the antenna, and I put some electrical tape on it so the UFL doesn't ground out on the carbon. I've already bound the receiver using a tiny whoop battery to the Crossfire module, and then I'm going to go ahead and solder up these wires here where they need to go. We now have everything wired up here. We got everything buttoned up, all the wires that we ran from the receiver and the VTX, and including this telemetry wire that we had to splice into. Everything is tucked all up under the flight controller. It makes for a really clean build, but overall it turned out pretty good. So now we're going to move on to flashing firmware on the flight controller, as well as the ESCs, and then also configure the OSD for the Mr. Steele PDB and see if we can get the smart audio working for the Mach 2 on the KISS FC. But overall, it came out really good, so we will see how it flies. Appreciate you guys watching. Thanks.